I think that no matter what, in all future seasons of Vanilla WoW, they should always have it so that the earlier versions of the PvP gear is what you get until AQ40 comes out. Because that's what happened in original WoW. Like, the PvP gear, even back in Classic, back in 2019, the PvP gear that people were getting at the end of Molten Core, beginning of BWL, that gear was not the original PvP gear. They were essentially getting like Phase 4 PvP gear during Phase like 2 of the game, because Blizzard, back in original Vanilla WoW, Blizzard changed the stats and improved all the PvP gear to have it keep up with raid gear. So there exists out there a completely different set of level 58 gear. Like, I think it even has different names. There's like 2 sets for every class. One that's worse because it came out with the original PvP system, honor system, and then the one that they added in later, I think with AQ40, there was a better set of gear. So there's 2 sets. The rank 12, 13, 14 stuff, they didn't actually like create multiple sets, they just updated all of it. So there's original stats for all of the rank 12, 13, and 14 stuff that is not anywhere near as overpowered as it is when we have seen it in like Classic WoW or Season Mastery. I think that for every vanilla server going forward, they should have those original PvP sets in and then update them come like AQ40. Just to help with like itemization and balancing and power creep and everything. Lots of private servers do progressive itemization that way. Because you can look up the older rank 10 sets on like Wowhead and stuff, because again, they're two separate sets. They have different names and everything, so they didn't ever have to like overwrite the data. I think you could still just give us the first version of the PvP gear and release the honor systems at launch, because then the PvP gear at that point is like, it's like on par with like dungeon and like Molten Core and Ixia gear. Some of the pieces might be as good as like some BWL pieces, but it's like not all that great. Then there's still like some incentive to do PvP, and there's a reward for people who like care about PvP. And you could also say like, if you achieve whatever rank you achieve at any point during the duration of this vanilla server, you will then get to purchase that PvP gear later on, even when the new stuff comes out. So there's still like an incentive to do it. There just doesn't exist this like super overpowered gear that for many classes is your best in slot, whether you're PvPing or doing dungeons and raids. I was thinking about this the other day. I'm sure that there's plenty of holes in this thinking, but in terms of like the PvP system in Vanilla WoW, right? Scrape the whole thing. Don't have the Vanilla WoW or honor system, any of that stuff. Add arenas and rated BGs. And have each player have their own, have a rating system similar to like your arena rating, and then have like a rated BG rating, and have like a weekly reset like we do with the arena system, where it's like your rating at the end of the week earns you arena points or PvP points, and then you can spend those PvP points on the original vanilla or like the vanilla WoW PvP gear. Like tie the better PvP gear to like higher like ratings and just do it that way. And the problem with that is like that only works for one season before everybody like ends up in like full rank 14 gear. So then I don't know what you do at the end of that season. Maybe what you do is season 1 is the original, like I talked about earlier, the original like rank 10 set and the original rank 12, 13, 14 items. Those are the rewards during like the first season, and then the second season you get the updated versions of all that gear. If you want to be able to parse, aren't you then like incentivized to do everything you can to eke out all of the performance that you can? Like, you're gonna want to try to perform your rotation at the highest level. You're gonna want your guild to stack the raid group correctly, but also your party correctly. If you already have that mentality of like, I want to do everything that I can to make this happen, and I want my guild to help facilitate these things, then I don't understand why you aren't just okay with the world buffs being what they are. I understand like they're annoying to get, they're work to get, it sucks losing them, all that stuff. I think it also adds an element to the whole parsing thing, where it's like, oh, if you getting your world buffs is part of parsing, you just lump it all together. It's not that you have to get them to parse, it's that like that's part of the parse. people who min-maxed getting their world buffs so that they had, 59 or 60 minutes on every single one of them going into the raid so that they knew they would get the absolute max out of them. Like, that's part of the min-max. That's part of them parsing. And then making sure that they stayed alive throughout the entire raid, but also like pushed the limits of their performance, right? A lot of people played along this fine line of, all right, I'm gonna try to, DPS my face off, but if I take one step too far and push it a little too hard, I'm gonna pull through, I'm gonna die, then it's all out the window. That makes the play, I think, a lot more interesting and dynamic, because there's a reason to stay alive, like a much bigger reason to stay alive. If you're into like parsing and speedrunning and things like that, dying becomes like such a bigger deal. And I think it's good. I think all these things are good because they make the game feel like kind of dangerous. They also make things more meaningful, because you also are probably like, when you die with world buffs, it's not just, I'm not gonna parse tonight. It's also like, man, think about all the time I spent getting that, invested a bunch of time and effort into getting those world buffs to then like make a mistake and die. Like, that's a meaningful experience. It may not be a positive one, but it's a meaningful one. And I think moments like that are good to have in video games. It gives you incentive to play the game better. There's a risk and a reward. And when there's punishment for the risk, I feel like that's good. It's a good thing. Vanilla is not a skill-based game. There are situations where truly skilled players can shine, but all in all, like, at the end of the day, like, I don't think the thing that draws the min-maxers into vanilla is not the skill ceiling, because I don't think the skill ceiling is all that high. It's the amount of sweat and time and effort that you can put into the game to gain an edge. And a lot of that stuff is not fun and exciting, right? It's like the PvP grind, which is months. It's like farming all those extra consumables, getting your world buffs. It's like maybe PTRing a speedrun. The more time you throw at it, the better you're gonna perform, the better your guild's gonna be doing. It's weird because I feel like a lot of people criticize Classic WoW, or they try to argue that like Classic WoW players think that Classic WoW is like a high skill game, and it's like, I don't think that's the case at all. I think that people who take Classic WoW seriously and like do speedrunning and who parse in Classic WoW, they know that it's not necessarily a high skill game. What they know is that it's a time investment game. The more time you throw into it, the more reward you'll get from it in like a ton of different ways. And that's part of what makes it fun and interesting. The cap on that is so high. The cap on that like time investment is so high that it feels like you can just like throw everything at it, still gain something from it. And I think that that's good. I don't think that attracts the average player. The like more casual player definitely doesn't. I like that about Classic WoW more than I like the way that things are sort of set up in Wrath. I appreciate the way that things are set up in Wrath, right? Where it's like achievements or a thing. There is some incentive to go out and do a bunch of things in the world, to try different things in dungeons, all that stuff. And then there's rewards for doing it. Like, you might get a new mount, you might get a pet, you might get like a tavern, you might get these different things. There's a lot to do in Wrath with some incentives to it, but it's way different than vanilla. Because vanilla is like, there's a ton of different things to do in the game, and the incentives for doing it are to gain tiny edges. Maybe on like other players, right? It might mean that you make more gold on the auction house because you did this thing earlier or faster, or you got luckier with it. It might mean that you perform, you parse a little bit better in raids because of the things that you do. Your guild runs the raid a little bit faster. You are able to, like, your pre-made group is able to be an extra bit sweatier because everyone has engineering and farmed up all of the crazy engineering gadgets and consumables and stuff before getting, like, deep into the PvP grind. Like, it's all these little things that give you an edge in the game for doing them versus Wrath of the Lich King, where it's all these little extra things in the game that give you, like, some sort of cosmetic reward. I am partial to the way of doing things in vanilla because I like throwing hours at a game and getting something for it. With Wrath, I'm throwing hours at it, and I'm just like having fun doing it. I'm not really worried about achievements or the cosmetic things. That's also why like I'm playing a bunch of different characters. And I'm not really focusing on one character's like achievements or mounts or anything like that, because that's not what incentivizes me. I think they could make world buffs a lot easier. They could have Chrono Boon in at the launch of the game, make it so that none of the world buffs are dispellable, and so that the only way that you're going to lose them basically is if you die. You know what that does? That incentivizes world PvP, which I think is a good thing in the game, at least when servers are balanced. But yeah, there's things you can do to make world buffs not as toxic, which I think was the big problem in Classic. They felt very toxic.